In Boston's outlying neighborhoods, things are more spread out, sometimes even buffered by stretches of open space. One example on the border of Hyde Park, Roslindale, and Mattapan is Crane Ledge Woods with the formation known as Sally's Rock. The site has long straddled the border between natural and neglected, but it's privately owned, and part of it's currently being considered for a large-scale housing development. At a recent virtual meeting, area residents came out strongly for preserving the open space, and another meeting is scheduled for tomorrow night. Our guests are two of the residents from the Crane Ledge Woods Coalition, Lokita Jackson and Lisa Beatman. I'd like to thank you both very much for being with us. I want to start with Lisa, because what I've described here, it sounds like a very fuzzy thing between a picturesque natural area and something that the world forgot about. How do you see it?
Well, not just me, but many of the local residents, people abutting, and in all the little pocket neighborhoods surrounding the woods, we see it as a kind of a hidden treasure. And it's 24 acres of tree canopy and wildlife habitat, and there are lots of natural assets that it provides as is in terms of carbon absorption and stormwater management and tranquility and a buffer from all of the air pollution from the surrounding congested roadways.
Kind of to Lokita, I know that there's a lot of need for housing in Boston wherever you can put it. So, it's hard to get around that. But at the same time, if you're concerned about environmental justice, how important is this sort of swath of trees and rocks? What difference does it make?
Yes, Chris. So one of the things that you mentioned about the housing, it's not necessarily about trees versus housing. Now, there's one number that was reported a couple months ago out there that was saying that there's about 4,000 roughly vacant units in the city of Boston. That may give or take some numbers. So we know that housing is available already. When we're thinking about trees and how important it is, we understand that environmentally speaking, when we're thinking about climate resilience and so forth, as Lisa mentioned, tranquility for our seniors, mid-age, and children, having a place where they can go and decompress, especially during this pandemic, as well as get some well-needed exercise. We know that the city has desired to have a park within 10 minutes distance from all of the residents in the city of Boston. And in this particular community, there is not any. Me particular, I don't have a park within a 10-minute walk, although Crane Ledge Woods could be. I've walked up there to be able to see where it was, and it's a 10-minute walk for me. And so when we're looking at environmental concerns, dealing with the wonderful mature trees, we know that each acre of mature trees absorbs about 2.5 tons of carbon annually. And so considering that, and its exchange releasing oxygen for us to breathe in, we know that it absorbs asthma-causing pollution that comes from the highway, right? The parkway traffic and so forth. And so if there are going to be new planted saplings along the development, it's going to take decades for those new saplings to be able to produce and to do the kind of work that these already established mature trees are doing. So there's a huge effect. The tree canopy reduces that heat island effect. And so we know that those residents in the community that suffer respiratory illnesses like asthma, for instance, when it's very hot, it makes it much more difficult for them to breathe. Well, these trees are reducing that heat island effect. So it makes it more pleasant for them to breathe and not suffer from those respiratory illnesses. And so there are many other benefits of these trees. Lisa mentioned storm water preserving. And so think about flooding, because right now you got this cliff, and if you clear cut so many acres of these trees and everything, where is that water going to go? And things are going to go downward, right? Water falls downward in the path of least resistance. And so we have the natural process of the absorption that's taking place. But if these trees are clear cut, then all of that water, when we have our downpours, are going to be like flooding those areas that are closest, especially those neighborhoods along Crane Street and Clare Avenue below the Crane Ledge Woods. Think about Morrissey Boulevard when it's flooded. Think about American Legion Highway when it's flooded. We're going to see potentially that and more severe flooding because we don't have the benefit of the trees and so forth to absorb. So there are a lot of different effects of this, and we don't want to see those negative effects happen.
Lisa, when it comes to absorption, there is a difference between what's there now, between the ground and the trees, and yes, the rocks as well. But also what I've seen about the plans for the development, because you got something like 270 units that are planned and maybe 455 parking spaces, which to me sounds like a lot of asphalt if it's not enclosed in some way.
Yes, the preliminary design that we have seen shows a clear cutting all 14 acres and paving, you know, 9 very large, very long buildings and parking, and a few ornamental shrubs and trees. And it makes an enormous difference. And one of the issues is that most of the development happening in Boston is on already paved land, old abandoned factories, things like that. So natural assets are not destroyed in that process. So there's a very, very big difference between that and these woods. And I forgot to say earlier that this is a very unique place because it has this spectacular 80-foot bluff where you can see for miles and miles. There's nothing like it in Boston. And we think it's very important to preserve the land and have public access to it.
Going back to Lokita, because this is land that it's owned by a church on the Fairmount Indigo corridor. And, like a lot of churches out there, they might be concerned about money that after they've gone through the pandemic here. So if they can't sell this to someone who's going to develop the housing, what does that mean for them? If the city says we're going to keep this as woods.
Yeah, well, we advocate as the Crane Ledge Woods Coalition that other opportunities, whether at the city or at the state level or organizations like Mattapan or what have you, may be willing purchasers of the property so that the church is able to still, as it already is, thriving. Now, of course, they have their own intelligent, financial directors and so forth working for them, but we could see it as an opportunity for the city to get involved and really purchase this land and make it a park for our community within a 10-minute walk. And so we know that by way of different publications that it's on Boston, the city of Boston's radar for this land to be potentially protected as well as utilized for green space in this area of Boston. And so when we're thinking about the climate ready Boston, we're thinking about Imagine Boston 2030, we can read that they're requiring the expanded and quote unquote expanded and maintained urban tree canopy. And so this open space and recreation plan, it aims to protect Crane Ledge Woods. And in doing so, it would implement the urban forest, right? That plan by increasing urban wilds by roughly about 12.5%. So I know your question was about the financial impact on the church. I think it's a wonderful property for the city to purchase or some other organization to purchase from the church at their market value, of course. And so that we can turn this into the green space that the city of Boston so desires it to be. And again, within 10 minutes of the residents around it.
I want to come back to Lisa, because you and Lokita sound as if you've been absorbed in these issues about environmental justice for quite a while. But what about the stage of getting the neighborhood to focus on this? What has that been like for you?
Well, it has been wonderful. We came together as a coalition a few months ago when the development project became public. And some of us actually have been working for quite a while regarding seeking protection of of the woods. And so there's a coalition of 7 neighborhood associations, some in Hyde Park, Eastern Roslindale, Mattapan. It's amazing. So we all put our heads together. And the first thing we said is, let's find out what our memberships, what the local residents, the people most impacted by this land, by its future use. Let's find out what they think, and then we'll see where to go with that. And as Lokita mentioned, we organized our first community meeting a couple weeks ago We actually thought there might be more mixed opinions, but 100% of the many people who spoke up or wrote in the chat were fully for 100% conservation of the land. And it was amazing and very diverse group. So it's like a mandate that we have now.
Lokita, I grew up in another part of Hyde Park on another hill, and I would look out and I would see Salvy's Rock, and in my kid's imagination, it was like the Grand Canyon. I knew I was exaggerating, but what's it like for people in your neighborhood? How do they think of this place?
Interesting you say that. So when I was walking and canvassing Sunday afternoon the area and passing out flyers, one of the neighbors right there on Farrar Avenue, just behind the Victoria Heights off of Ruskin Road entrance to the Crane Ledge Woods, had just come out of her house, and she read the flyer immediately, and she just said, "No way can we have this here. We do not want those buildings in our backyards. We want to have this nature here. We want to preserve it." And she talked about the wildlife that's there and protecting them, and being able to have this nice, relaxing, tranquil environment. So to your question, I'm just thinking about the neighbors and what I have heard. That I've heard that before a few times, and I'm sure Lisa can agree with me. We've heard it from various different residents immediately impacted by this and immediately abutting the property, who they don't want it to happen. And so as far as development, they want it to be maintained and preserved and conserved.
And finally, Lokita, there is a meeting coming up tomorrow night. Anything that people should know about that, especially if they haven't gone to something before and they want to get connected? What do they need to do?
Absolutely. So to get connected and to get involved, you want to email us at craneledgeinfo@gmail.com. That's Crane, CRANE, ledge, LEDGE, info, INFO @gmail.com. We will respond promptly. We're looking for more people to get engaged, get informed, and get involved.
I'd like to thank you both very much for being with us, Lokita Jackson and Lisa Beatman. We'll have more news in just a moment.